I destroyed my relationship over late-night texts because I was lonely, and now I've discovered how close he was to proposing. Okay, just tell me. Am I crazy, or is he the one who's completely lost his mind? He left. Grayson just left. The door clicked shut with this awful finality, and now the silence in our apartment is so loud it's making my ears ring. He packed a single duffel bag, didn't even make eye contact, and walked out of the life we built together. And for what? For some text messages. That's it. Texts I sent to someone else when I was feeling lonely late at night. I'm not talking about sexting or professions of love or any of that. We were talking about books, about a stupid TV show, about how frustrating work was. It was a distraction, a digital pen pal. It was just words. A harmless way to feel a spark of connection because he was so buried in his work, and I felt invisible. I was just lonely, you know? This is the man I told, just last week with my head on his chest, that I couldn't breathe without him. The man whose world I thought I was the center of. He saw a conversation on my phone, and suddenly, I was a stranger. He handed me a life sentence for what feels like a parking ticket. He was my entire world, my only real anchor, and he threw it all away because I had a moment of weakness. So please, just be honest with me. Am I the monster here? Or did he just use this as the perfect excuse to run? Because sitting here, staring at the empty space on his side of the bed, I genuinely can't tell anymore. To be clear, Grayson is a good man. I need you to understand that. He's the kind of guy who remembers to pay your car insurance before you do, the one who spends a whole Saturday fixing the leaky faucet your landlord has ignored for months. He's solid, dependable. He's the foundation you're supposed to build a life on. When we first met, that quiet strength was what drew me in. He felt safe. After a string of guys who were all fireworks and then fizzled out, Grayson was like a calm, steady harbor. But a harbor can also be a very quiet place. His job, something with urban planning and development, demanded so much of him. It wasn't just a 9-5, it was his passion, his mission. He'd come home with his mind still tracing blueprints and zoning laws, his energy completely depleted. He would kiss my forehead, ask about my day in a way that felt more like a checklist item than genuine curiosity, and then retreat into his own world. He showed his love through actions, he always said. The new shelves he put up, the fancy coffee machine he bought because he knew I liked it, the savings account he was meticulously building for our future. Those things are wonderful, they are. But you can't have a conversation with a savings account. You can't get validation from a well-organized bookshelf. I'd try to talk to him, really talk, about my anxieties, about the little dramas at my job as a paralegal, about the existential dread that sometimes creeps in at 2 a.m. He'd listen, or he'd appear to, but his eyes would be distant. He'd offer a practical solution, like, maybe you should get more sleep, when what I wanted was for him to say, I know, that sounds so hard, tell me more. I started to feel like a ghost in my own home, a well-cared-for pet whose basic needs were met, but whose soul was being ignored. That's when Theo slid into we were both in an online forum for a niche podcast we liked. He was funny, quick-witted, and his messages were always thoughtful. He actually asked follow-up questions. When I mentioned a problem, he didn't try to fix it. He'd just say, wow, that's incredibly frustrating, and suddenly I'd feel seen. He was in a different time zone, a world away, which made it feel even safer. He wasn't a threat. He was just a friendly voice in the digital void, a remedy for the silence Grayson's ambition left in its wake. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night. It was one of those evenings thick with unspoken tension. Grayson was hunched over his laptop at the dining table, which had become his second office, the focused beam of his desk lamp carving him out of the darkness. The only sounds were the frantic clicking of his keyboard and the hum of the refrigerator. He was deep in the final push for a massive proposal, the one he kept saying would set them up for the next 5 years. I was on the sofa, trying to read a book, but the words just swam on the page. A familiar ache was spreading in my chest, a tight knot of anxiety that always appeared when I felt him drifting away into his world of deadlines and deliverables. I felt like a child with her face pressed against the glass of a bakery, watching a life I was supposed to be part of but couldn't quite reach. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I put my book down, walked over to him, and gently placed my hands on his shoulders. Hey, I whispered. He flinched, startled. Hey, babe. Sorry, I'm in the zone. I know, I said, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. I'm feeling really off tonight. I need you. He stopped typing and swiveled in his chair to look at me. The exhaustion was etched around his eyes. He gave me a tired but genuinely sweet smile, reached up, and pulled me down for a kiss. It was brief, a peck. Baby, just give me a little longer, he murmured against my lips. This project is a monster, but it's for us, for our future. I promise, once this is done, I'm all yours. Okay, I said, forcing a smile. I get it, but I didn't. As I walked back to the sofa, his words echoed in my head. For our future. It was always about the future. A hypothetical, perfect life that was always just one more project, one more late night away. What about right now? What about the gaping hole I felt in the present? The rejection, however gentle, felt like a physical shove. I picked up my phone. It felt warm and alive in my hands. I opened my chat with Theo. His icon was a cheerful green dot. Available. I started typing, the words pouring out of me. I told him about the silence, about feeling like a satellite in Grayson's orbit. Theo, as always, was the perfect audience. He didn't offer solutions, he offered empathy. He mirrored my frustration, validated my loneliness. We talked for hours. The conversation flowed effortlessly from my complaints to shared jokes to deeper feelings about what we both wanted from life. The glow from the screen was a warm cocoon, a world away from the cold, silent apartment. And then, fueled by a cocktail of resentment and the intoxicating feeling of being understood, I typed the sentence. I watched my own fingers do it, a strange, out-of-body experience. Sometimes, I feel like you get me more than he does. My thumb hovered over the send button. A tiny voice in my head screamed, don't. This is a line. This is a point of no return. But the desire to be seen, to have my feelings acknowledged by someone, anyone, was stronger. I pressed send. The little blue bubble popped up on the screen, and the relief that washed over me was immediate and overwhelming. I had been heard. I don't remember when I fell asleep, just that it was very late, and I was still on the sofa, my phone lying on my chest. When I woke up, the sun was streaming through the windows, casting long, accusing shadows across the living room floor. My neck was stiff from sleeping on the sofa, a dull ache that was nothing compared to the sudden, sharp dread coiling in my stomach. For a moment, I was disoriented, the events of the night before feeling like a distant, hazy dream. Then I saw him, and the dream became a nightmare. Grayson wasn't at his laptop. He was sitting at the dining table, perfectly still, a mug of untouched coffee in front of him. He was dressed for work, but his posture was rigid, unnatural. The air in the room was heavy, suffocating, charged with a terrible energy. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at my phone, which was on the table in front of him. The screen was on. My blood ran cold. My heart started hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might break through. Morning, he said. His voice was unnervingly calm, a dead, flat tone devoid of any emotion. It was the kind of calm that comes after a hurricane has already passed through and leveled everything in its path. Hey, I managed, my voice a pathetic, raspy whisper. I sat up, clutching the throw blanket around me like a shield. You're up early. Or late? The question sounded insane, a desperate grasp for normalcy in a moment that was anything but. I finished the proposal around 4, he said, finally lifting his eyes to meet mine. There was no anger in them. There was something far worse, a profound, bottomless disappointment. It was the look you give something beautiful that you've just watched shatter on the floor. He paused, letting the silence stretch for an eternity. Every tick of the clock on the wall felt like a hammer blow. Your phone lit up, he continued, his voice still terrifyingly level. A new message came in from Theo. He said the name as if it were a foreign word he was tasting for the first time. I couldn't breathe. I knew exactly what message he must have seen. Theo's inevitable, validating reply to my late-night confession. He didn't need to say anything else. I saw the whole scene play out in my mind. Him, exhausted but relieved, his mind full of our future, coming to take care of me, only to be confronted by that one, single sentence glowing in the dark. Sometimes I feel like you get me more than he does. The ultimate betrayal, delivered not in a passionate scream, but in a quiet, calculated confession to another man. Grayson, I can explain, I started, the words tumbling out in a panicked, incoherent rush. It's not what it looks like. He's just a friend, an online friend, it's nothing. I was just lonely, and you were so busy, and I was just venting. It didn't mean anything, I swear to God, it meant nothing. He held up a hand, a simple, decisive gesture that silenced me completely. I read it, Dahlia, he said, his voice flat. I read all of it, I scrolled back. For months. Every time I was working late for us, every time I was on a site visit for us, you were talking to him. You were complaining about me to him. He finally looked down at his coffee mug, tracing the rim with his finger. I thought we were a team. I thought we were building the same future. All those nights, all that stress, I was doing it for a reason. For the house we talked about near the coast, for the life we were planning. He looked back up at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of raw, unfiltered pain. But I get it now. I was building a house and you were just looking for an audience. I can't give you that. I can't be a 24/7 source of validation. I'm just a man. A man who was trying his best. I thought my commitment, my work, my love, I thought that was enough. It's clear now that it wasn't. The finality in his tone was like a physical blow. He wasn't yelling, he wasn't accusing, he was just stating a fact. He was delivering the emotional autopsy of our relationship, and I was the cause of death. His words hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen out of the room. I opened my mouth to argue, to deny, to say anything to erase that look from his face, but no sound came out. He was right, and the fact that he was so calm, so analytical about it, was 1,000 times more terrifying than if he had screamed. He pushed his chair back, the sound scraping harshly against the hardwood floor. I'm going to pack a bag, he said, his voice still holding that same chillingly detached tone. That's what broke the spell, the word pack. It was real, this was happening. Pack, I scrambled off the sofa, the blanket falling to the floor. What are you talking about? You're not going anywhere. We can fix this, Grayson. We just need to talk. Talk? He let out a short, bitter laugh that had no humor in it. We should have been talking for months, Dahlia. Instead, you were talking to him. He walked towards the bedroom, and I followed him, a desperate shadow at his heels. It wasn't talking, it was typing, it was meaningless. I pleaded, my voice cracking. I grabbed his arm and he flinched, pulling away as if my touch burned him. He turned to face me in the bedroom doorway, and for the first time, his composure cracked. The disappointment in his eyes was now laced with a cold, hard anger. Don't you get it? The problem isn't that you talked to him. The problem is that when you felt a crack in our foundation, you didn't bring me a hammer and nails. You went outside and started showing the crack to a stranger. He went into the closet and pulled out the duffel bag he used for weekend trips. He started pulling clothes from drawers with an efficient, impersonal series of movements. T-shirts, socks, jeans. Each item he packed felt like a shovelful of dirt being thrown on the coffin of our relationship. My panic escalated into hysteria. I was sobbing now, ugly, gasping breaths. Please, don't do this, I love you. It was a mistake, a stupid, stupid mistake. I was just lonely. Can't you understand that? He stopped packing and zipped the bag shut. He walked over to his nightstand, picked up his keys and wallet, and then he looked at me, really looked at me for the last time. I do understand it, he said, and his voice was suddenly soft, which was somehow the cruelest thing of all. That's why I have to go. I can't live with someone who, in their heart, is always looking for the exit. He walked past me. I tried to block his path, but he moved around me as if I were a piece of furniture. I followed him to the front door, still begging, still promising I would change, that I would delete Theo, that I would do anything. He paused with his hand on the doorknob, but he didn't turn around. I saw him pull out his phone. His thumb moved across the screen. My own phone, still on the dining table, buzzed. A notification, blocked, "Goodbye, Dahlia." And then he was gone. The door clicked shut, and the deadbolt slid into place. I stood there, staring at the wood grain, listening to his footsteps fade down the hall. My world, which had felt so solid just hours before, had completely disintegrated. I slid down the door and collapsed onto the floor, the sound of my own frantic, useless sobs filling the crushing silence of the apartment. The next few days were a blur of cheap wine and an endless, looping playlist of our songs that I couldn't bring myself to turn off. The apartment felt cavernous, each empty room an echo chamber for my regret. I called him, of course, hundreds of times. Each call went straight to voicemail, his familiar, cheerful greeting a torturous reminder of what I'd lost. My texts, a frantic barrage of apologies, explanations, and desperate pleas, remained undelivered, mocked by that single, sterile, message-blocked notification. I was screaming into a void. On the third day, my phone rang, and my heart leaped into my throat, a wild hope surging through me. But it wasn't him. It was Jessica, our mutual friend. "Dahlia, I've been trying to reach you. Are you okay?" The dam broke. I unleashed the whole story on her, a messy, tear-soaked torrent of words. I painted myself as the victim, emphasizing Grayson's punishing work schedule, my profound loneliness, and framing the text with Theo as a harmless cry for attention. I ended my tirade with the same question I'd been asking myself for 72 hours. "He's completely overreacting, right, Jess? It was just a stupid mistake." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her take a deep breath. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. "Dahlia, do you remember when you and Grayson first started getting serious? He told you about his parents." The wine-fueled fog in my brain parted for a second. "What about them?" I asked, though a cold dread was already beginning to form in the pit of my stomach. "He told you his dad left because his mom had an emotional affair with a coworker for years," Jessica said, her words slow and deliberate, each one a tiny, sharp needle. "He said it wasn't physical, but that his dad felt like a ghost in his own marriage. He told you that for him, that kind of betrayal, the secrecy, the turning to someone else for comfort, that was the one thing he could never, ever forgive. It's his one absolute hardline deal-breaker. You knew that." The phone felt slick in my hand. She was right. I did know that. He told me that story one night, his voice thick with the remembered pain of a child caught in the crossfire. It was a core piece of his history, the wound that had shaped his views on loyalty and trust. And in my selfish quest for validation, I had taken a shard of glass and shoved it right into that old wound. Later that week, Jessica called again, her voice strained and awkward. "Hey, Grayson asked if I could come by and pick up the rest of his things. He doesn't want to see you." I numbly agreed. While she was packing his books into boxes, I wandered into the office, feeling like a ghost in my own home. I sat at his desk, running my hand over the smooth wood. I pulled open the top drawer, for no reason other than to feel close to him. Inside, amongst pens and paper clips, was his tablet. He'd forgotten it. My hands shook as I picked it up and turned it on. The browser was still open. The last tab he'd been looking at was a webpage for a local, independent jewelry designer. And on the screen was a ring. A delicate, vintage-inspired piece with a sapphire, my birthstone, as the center stone. A ring I had pointed out in a magazine months ago, saying it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. My breath hitched. I clicked on another open tab. It was a Google Doc. The title was simple, "May Proposal Plan." My world tilted on its axis as I scrolled through it. A detailed plan for a trip to the coast, a reservation at the restaurant where we had our first date, notes on what he wanted to say. He wasn't building a future for some vague, distant tomorrow. He was building it for next month, and I had burned it to the ground. I'm sitting in the middle of the living room floor now. His boxes are gone. Jessica took them yesterday, her pitying glances feeling like tiny cuts. The apartment is officially just mine, and it has never felt less like a home. It's just a space, filled with the ghosts of plans and a future that will never happen. My phone is in my hand. It feels heavy, like a weapon. A few minutes ago, I opened the Notes app and typed out a furious, scathing message. I called Grayson a coward, a hypocrite. I accused him of being emotionally unavailable, of pushing me away, of using my mistake as an excuse to bail when things got real. I detailed every lonely night, every time he chose his laptop over me. It felt good, righteous even, to see all my justifications laid out in black and white. It was all his fault. Then, my thumb hovering over the copy button, I deleted it. Every single word. My fingers started moving again, this time composing a different message. A desperate, groveling apology. I begged for his forgiveness. I told him I was a broken, awful person, but that I could change. I promised I would go to therapy, that I would do anything, absolutely anything, to earn back a fraction of his trust. I wrote that I couldn't live without him. It was pathetic and raw and utterly humiliating. I deleted that one too. Now I just stare at the screen. I open my chat history. I scroll up, past the unanswered calls and the blocked messages, until I find my conversation with Theo. His last message, the one Grayson saw, is still there. Of course I get you. That's because I'm actually listening. My thumb hovers over the text box. What would I even say? Hi, sorry I ghosted. I was busy blowing up my entire life. The cursor blinks patiently. Blink, blink, blink. A steady, mocking rhythm in the crushing silence. I close the app. 1 minute, I'm convinced I'm the victim. The next, I know with absolute certainty that I am the villain. The whiplash between anger and self-loathing is making me sick. I ruined the best thing that ever happened to me. No, he drove me to it. I miss him so much I can't breathe. No, I hate him for leaving. I don't know who I am anymore without him. And the worst part is, I have no one to blame but myself.